Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be painting this very simple cherry blossom and moonlit scene, perfect for spring. So let's dive right in. So I'm going to quickly go over the supplies and the colors. All the supplies you can see listed in the description below, but the colors I'm going to be using are Opera Pink, Carmine, and also mixing that Opera Pink with the Carmine. If you don't have either of those, you can use a quinacridone rose or any kind of red. And also burnt umber, which is sort of a deep brown, and then mixing that Carmine with the burnt umber for a slightly richer and darker red. And then also a dark blue indigo. You could also use phthalo blue or cobalt or ultramarine. And then mixing the indigo with the Carmine or any red that you have to create a nice deep shade of purple. So yeah, like I said, don't stress about not having all of these colors. Any color that you use will work just great. So the first step we're going to be doing is masking out the flowers in the branches and also the moon in the upper right corner. We are going to be doing a wet on wet background, so using the masking fluid will help block out the flowers so that we can freely paint in that nice and diffused out background and not having to worry about covering up our flowers. Also, you can find this sketch that I did of the flowers on my website, and I am linking that below. And I'm using Winsor & Newton masking fluid, which is a pretty high quality, and I definitely recommend using a high quality masking fluid. It will just make the whole process a lot less frustrating. And then I'm using a paintbrush that I only use for masking fluid, and I rinse it off in a jar of water with dish soap. That'll prevent the masking fluid from caking on after it's drying, and you can keep reusing the brush. Okay, so I've let the masking fluid dry completely and we're getting started on the background here. I'm using a size 12 round brush and spreading around clean water all over the white part in the background and moving pretty quickly. I do live in a dry climate, so you might not experience this as much, but the water where I live dries really quickly, and I want to make sure that the paper stays nice and wet so that when I do drop in the color, that I don't get any unwanted splotches or uneven stages of drying. So the first color that I'm going to use is the indigo mixed with the carmine, which is my blue and my red to make the purple, going in with a tea-like consistency and dropping that in. Then just dropping in plain indigo at the bottom there, keeping in mind that the moon is the light source here, so the areas further away from the moon will be darker, which is why I'm using more of the blue in the corner. And to excuse my dog in the background. And here I am just tilting the board that my piece is taped to. So just letting the colors run freely together, getting nice and blended, and then using my dish towel to clean up the edges of any excess water. And once I've got the initial background colors on, I'm going in with a thicker version of each of those shades. So a more milky consistency of the purple and the indigo, going into the corners, leaving the area around the moon a little bit lighter. And just, yeah, I'm using a technique to kind of do some lifting here with my damp brush. Just to do some lifting around the moon to give it kind of a glowing effect. That's optional, but if you choose to do so, that's also a nice option. Okay, and then I let the background dry completely, and then I'm just rubbing off the masking fluid. You can also use an eraser for this if it's a little uncomfortable for your fingers. And I do apologize for the shakiness. I don't have the best desk that is shake proof for when I'm doing any work here. Okay, so now we're getting started on the flowers. I am using a watered down version of my Opera Pink. And like I said before, if you don't have Opera Pink, you can just use a light red or a quinacridone rose as well. Since this is the first layer, I'm keeping things pretty light here. We're going to go from light to dark, since watercolor is a transparent medium. And with the pink still wet in those flowers, I'm dropping in the Carmine in the centers to describe the centers and the darker areas of the flowers and the petals. And if you do want the reference photo, I did link that in the description below. So yeah, I'm just going into each flower and repeating the same process, light pink, and then dropping in Carmine in the center and wherever I see some dark shadowy areas in the reference photo. So now our flowers and the petals have dried, and we're going in with the second layer, which is the more mid-tone areas, to describe the shadows of those flowers and petals. Here I'm going in with a smaller brush. This is a size 4 round brush by Silver Brush from the Black Velvet series, and I have linked those supplies below. I'm going in with a lightened version of the Carmine, and just very delicately and very carefully sketching out irregular shadow shapes of the petals that I am noticing in the reference photo. I'm not being too precise, just adding in shadows wherever I think it would make sense, and to show some very subtle petal variation. We don't want to go in too dark here because we want to slowly build those shadow areas to get a realistic effect. And after I've done those lighter shadow areas, I'm going in with a darker, more milky version of the Carmine and doing even more darker areas, like the centers and then the area where the branch meets the petals there, just to further deepen those shadowy areas. And now I'm going to be moving on to the branch area. I'm pre-wetting it with my size 4 round brush and just very carefully doing an even coat of water throughout those branches and trying not to get any water on the petals. And then with a light version of the burnt umber, just dropping that in to the branch. And then once this dries, we'll be going in with a darker version of the burnt umber. And then, yeah, I'm just doing the pre-wetting for the top portion of the branch. You can do it all at once, but here I just thought it would be easier since there's those flowers in the middle, splitting up the branch. You can do it piece by piece like this, or any other way that you'd like. And now that those second layers are now dry, we're going to be just deepening the shadows even more with, I'd say, more of a tea-like consistency of the Carmine here, and just, yeah, outlining the petals just a little bit more, still being pretty delicate and careful not to cover up a lot of the lighter areas, and then going in further with darker Carmine to blend out more of those shadows, and using the reference photo to help me kind of see where the light is hitting the petals that are more close to the moon and more farther out, so to speak, are going to be lighter. The ones closer to the center, like for instance, if the flower is facing away from the moon, then those petals on the inside will be darker. So here I'm going in with my size 0 round brush, and I'm going in with a milky consistency of burnt umber and Carmine to do the final shadowy areas of those centers. So if you kind of notice cherry blossoms, they have these little stamens that come from the center. So I'm working on those and doing like little thread-like shapes from the center of the flowers, and then just adding tiny little shadows in the corners wherever I see the dark areas of each petal and flower. So once I'm satisfied with the flowers and the dark areas, and I feel like it's time to move on, I am going to get a darkened version of burnt umber with my size 4 round brush, and then go on the underside of the branch and the little branches, making sure that the shadow areas are facing away from the moon, which is our light source. And once I'm satisfied with the branch and the flowers, I'm going to get started on the moon. I'm just using a small damp brush to smooth the edges of the moon to make it softer. And then I'm going in with white gouache to cover the moon area. And if you don't have white gouache, you can just skip this part. You can, actually what you can do is you can go in with clean water and then drop that into cover the moon with the clean water and use a wet on wet technique, and then go in with a little bit of Payne's Gray or Indigo and drop that in. As you can see, I'm using a little bit of Indigo watercolor and dropping that into the wet gouache. But yeah, you don't need white gouache. I just chose to use it to add a little bit of brightness. And we're pretty much done here, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. You can go ahead and remove your tape once it's dry. Thanks so much for following along. Have a great day.